From the studio in the bonus room, above the garage on the north side of Cary, this is the Triangle Talk Show. And we are doing this one on June 21st, 2018. It is episode 14. Don't get ahead of myself. Only episode 14. An interview episode. A field interview. I recorded this one in the field. I'm impressed with myself. Don't expect me to do this very often. It's a lot of work. And our most exciting topic to date, the NC DOT 10-year plan. Get to that in a second. I probably should say something about the immigration deal. It's not a triangle thing. As far as I know, none of the kids are being warehoused here in the Triangle area, as far as I know. But they're in places all around the rest of the country. So Trump said they have to separate families. Nothing he can do about it. Congress has to act. And then yesterday he said, okay, I can do something about it. Still trying to get Congress to do something about it, but he said, I can change it. I hate that they're taking kids away from their families. So I'll do something about it. After saying he couldn't for a long time. It's all political theater. You know, they're just playing with kids, making them the pawns in the politics. Nothing unusual there. About the only thing I will say about that is that if you have strong feelings about it, and who doesn't? Well, you know, actually, I don't have kids. I find myself a little disconnected from it. When I see the pictures of a little kid between two giant immigration agents, usually the picture's got the little kid and then just the feet or the legs of the immigration agents, and the kid is looking terrified. I mean, who's not going to be affected by that? But those pictures are out there for their political effect. If photographer can get a shot like that, the newsroom or the newspaper or whoever is going to use it will consider that to be ratings gold. Typically, they're real pictures or real things going on. But the news business is a little cynical. I think that when Rachel Maddow cried at the end of her show a couple nights ago, as she was reading a news story about the tender age centers where they're gathering up the babies and toddlers, I'm pretty sure that was real. I don't think she was staging that. So, yeah, it affects me, but not since I don't have kids, you know, it's a little harder to instantly hit the outrage. And because I've been watching the way the media does things, it's also a little harder to instantly hit the outrage. The thing to remember, the thing to keep in mind as this is happening is that your opportunity to affect it beyond protesting, maybe more effective than protesting, although it might not be a bad idea, and calling your representatives, congressmen, senators, is coming November, 6th, 9th? First Tuesday in November. Figure out who to vote for that will make a change in the direction you want it to go. If this is going to be a low turnout midterm election with no national activity for North Carolina, no senators, no governor. Okay, no governor's not national. No senators, no governor. The highest level elections will be for all of the congressional representatives, all 13 of them, and then all General Assembly. Most General Assembly senators and representatives. So when we get around to November, you might remember what was going on now. I don't know if it's going to be enough in the news to remind you that it's something you wanted to do something about. Might be. Might not. Maybe there'll be an October surprise. Do you react to those? Because everybody's going to try to pull one. Some will be successful and some won't. Everybody's going to try to pull one. And you kind of should have been... Here I am telling you what you should do. I'm going to should all over you. It would be nice for me if I remember all of the principles and things that I consider important all year long and apply them to the candidates that are available for me to vote for and figure out who to vote for. And unless whatever October surprise they've got coming up is something really serious, and they're going to make it sound really serious, but will it be? You know, it could be Clinton emails or a Trump. Well, Clinton won't be running, of course. Referring to the last election, Clinton emails. Or next time, a Trump P-tape or something. Try not to pay much attention here. It's me telling you what to do again. I thought I dedicated this show to not telling you what to do. It's really hard not to, though. Think hard about the October surprise. I'll be trying to remember what I was thinking about all year long, and this is one of those things. And figure out who to vote for based on what they say about that. Okay, so other interesting things, not for this show, but maybe for one coming up soon. Supreme Court is tossing out their verdicts, their decisions in this year's term. They punted on gerrymandering, and maybe next year they'll take up the North Carolina case, and that they may have a decision in that. That's what the news articles and the pundits are talking about now, since I think it was Pennsylvania and Maryland, they decided not to decide on those and sent them back. And a bunch of other stuff is going on. Maybe look at a show on the Supreme Court. But that reminds me that the Supreme Court and who becomes the justices may be the most important thing to think about in a presidential election, because it's going to be the longest lasting effect. If a president gets to nominate, to select justices for the Supreme Court, they will last long beyond that president's term of office. And we don't think about that very much, but I think that's one of the most important things to consider when deciding, not when deciding who to vote for, because you're going to have a pretty good idea who you want to vote for, if that's what the election is going to be. I don't think that's where I'm encouraging you to think about this. I'm encouraging you to think about it in your decision whether to vote or not. And if there's somebody running that you think you don't like very much, but my vote won't count. What kind of influence could I have? Why bother? And I'm not even sure I really care. There's some things about the candidate that I might perhaps favor, but they got some problems too. I don't know. Maybe I'll just stay home. Well, think about the influence that the guy you don't like so much, if that person is elected, will have in selecting Supreme Court justices for 4 or 8 years. If they get some. And we're in that situation now with the more liberal justices getting pretty darn old, in their 80s. Will they last 4 or 8 years on the bench? I mean, either retiring because they think it's a good idea or passing away. Trump could have the opportunity. I mean, the Republicans stole the last Democratic opportunity to nominate a Supreme Court justice. And now they may have a couple more during Trump's administration. Long-lasting effect. All right, the DOT. This is not going to be our most exciting show, I don't think. Department of Transportation is got a 10-year plan for highways, rail, transit, and cycling. This is a story out of the News and Observer. And I'm going to have to admit, as hard as I've tried to understand just exactly how this works, including a 30-minute interview that I'm going to play in a couple minutes with an engineer for the Department of Transportation, I don't quite understand how it all works. And I've been over it a few times in my brain, in the articles, the DOT website. The DOT is huge. They got a lot of projects, and I don't really understand how it all works. Sorry, Joey. I think I admitted during the interview that I, maybe understood 20%. Did I say 80%? 20? Well, you'll hear what I said. He was patient with me. Anyway, they got a plan a long time ahead to see what they're going to work on and where the money's going to come from. So we talk about that sort of thing in the interview. Some of it will be interesting, I think. Some of it maybe not so much. The article points to this website for the NCDOT. For those of you looking at the picture, for those of you not, it's called the 2020 to 2029 STIP, the State Transportation Improvement Program. Turns out there are other versions of this. There's one for 2018 to 2020, talking about stuff that is actually in progress now. And then this one is things that will be in progress for the next decade. And then there's a version that goes beyond that. And that's not what I'm looking for. None of these things are what I'm looking for. There's a map here someplace. Oh, it's on this page. There's a cool map, and I'll put a link to the story and to the DOT website. There's this cool map. It's got all of North Carolina on it, and inside that map is all of the Department of Transportation projects that they're working on, and you can drill down to your area and look at things that are being worked on, and it's very interactive. If people look into the video will see big blobs, and then they refine to something a little smaller. So you can see everything that they're working on, and you can click on them and get details of what they're working on. And the one I'm clicking on right now, this is something that's going on Interstate 40, and it's something that I'll talk to Joey Hopkins, the engineer, about. They're going to be adding those ramp metering, which is basically stop and go lights on the beginning of ramps or halfway down the ramp, so that everybody doesn't head on down the ramp and then get stuck at the bottom, not able to merge, and get things all clogged up. They switch between red and green pretty quickly. If you've been in other areas, or even there's a couple of them, I think, on the north end of the 540 Beltline right now. But I've seen them in other areas where they've been implemented for a long time. They switch from green to red pretty quickly. So you send a car and you stop. And a few seconds later, you send another car and you stop. And the idea is that each car gets to the end of the ramp and they can merge into heavy traffic without backing up along the ramp where everybody panics and doesn't know how to do things. So we're talking about doing that for a lot more intersections up and down I-40 and around 540. So that's one of the things that's coming up. But as you look across this map, there's lots of different things to get details of. And you can see what may be going on in your area or your commute. So again, I'll put a link to that on the triangletalkshow.com website, triangletalkshow.com, for episode 14. Right now we're in the middle of a comment period, so not only can you see what is proposed for your area, you can make a comment to the Department of Transportation, whether you like it, whether you want something different, whether you want something that's not listed. All that is available on their website. There have been some public meetings about it. I saw that story in the paper that talked about a public meeting up in Durham. And I haven't been to very many of these public meeting things. So I thought that I would go take a look at it. It was a Tuesday. Today is Thursday, so a couple days ago. And I headed up to Durham to see. It was in this office off of Duke Street. And when I got there about 4 o'clock, there were a few people there. About half the folks that you see on the picture or hear babbling in the background were actually staff. So 5 or 6 members of the public. They had these documents to look at. And then they had a couple of tablets that you could fill out a questionnaire and list your comments. This is also available on the website. But if you were there in person, you could pick up one of those tablets and then fill things out. It turns out there's a public service announcement on the website that also discusses what this is all about. So since they've done some of the work for me, I guess I will just play it if I've got the right thing up here. Yeah, I do.
Do you care about the future of transportation in your community?
Do you want your voice to be heard?
Then submit your comments to NCDOT today.
From June 4th through July 9th, NCDOT is asking the public to comment in person, in writing, or online about transportation projects around the state. Visit ncdot.gov/STI for more information on projects, a schedule of upcoming meetings, and an opportunity to comment online. Have a say in the future of North Carolina's transportation system. Visit ncdot.gov/STI today.
Yes, all very, very exciting. All right, so the next thing to do is to play my interview. It runs about 30 minutes. As I admit, it's not really exciting, but there are some interesting things about it, especially toward the last half. I think it gets more interesting. I haven't edited this to make it any shorter. I probably could, but I'm not going to, because I'd rather sit here for 30 minutes than spend a couple hours editing it. So I was talking to Joey Hopkins. He's a professional engineer. He's the Division Engineer for this part of North Carolina. He'll explain his job parameters and locations and stuff just as we get started. And then you will hear me try and often fail to speak intelligently about what the Department of Transportation is doing. So let's if I can get all this stuff in the right place, let's go to that interview. Who are you?
My name's Joey Hopkins, and I work with North Carolina Department of Transportation. I'm the Division Engineer in Division 5, and that Division 5 covers 7 geographical counties: Wake County, Durham County, Granville, Person, Franklin, Vance, and Warren.
And what is this activity today?
We're having a public meeting today to take comments on potential projects for the next round of our capital program, and that's a 10-year state transportation improvement plan.
10 years.
10-year capital plan. We update it every 2 years.
Okay, so you're talking about building roads, intersections, and those things take a long time to do and then last a long time. The planning stuff, I guess, starts way before any of us out there driving along the road start seeing barricades telling us we're going to have to find another way to work.
That's right. The planning could start years in advance of where we are now. We work in the urban areas like Wake and Durham counties. We work with metropolitan planning organizations, and those are set up under federal law. In Wake County, it's the Capital Area MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization. Here in Durham, it's the Durham Chapel Hill Carborough MPO. And we work with them to plan for future roads. And then eventually we hope that those plans get funded so we can program and plan, design, and build a project.
How do the plans get started? I guess we're talking about either improving a road or building a new one or adding a lane?
Right, and it really gets started at the local level, and you start looking at where there's needs, and that may be a capacity need where you know there's congestion or operational issues or a safety need, where from a crash standpoint or a combination of the two. And we're also looking at the future land use and trying to forecast where the needs are going to grow greater, and using that information and starting to plan these roads out, developing the long-range plans, and that feeds into our capital plan. And that's what we're working on today.
Who provides most of the input? Is it public? Is it local transportation departments?
Mostly it's the public, but again, we work with the local governments. The larger cities have transportation departments. They have transportation planners. Our rural areas have a rural planning organization that working with the local governments, the smaller governments who don't necessarily have the staff, but they work with the councilmen and the mayors and help us develop those plans.
Okay. So we're covering how many counties here?
7 counties.
All right. And within those 7 counties, there's a few million people, and a few dozen are going to show up here today?
Yes, sir.
So is this the only public input, or is there continuous public input available?
No, we have a 30-minute or 30-day comment period, and most of the public input we get now is from electronic. People go online and they comment electronically. In fact, I'm really surprised at our early turnout here today. In the last few years, we've had less than a handful of people show up to the official public meeting. But there's other opportunities either online to do that or working through the RPO and MPOs, because they also have public comment periods.
RPO and MPO?
That's the Rural Planning Organization. In our area, that's CAR-TAR, RPO. And our 2 MPOs is Metropolitan Planning Organization, Capital Area MPO, and Durham Chapel Hill Carborough MPO.
Okay. And what's the website to go to if you wanted to add a comment or see what's going on?
Our website is www.ncdot.gov, and you can find the information under the Strategic Transportation Investments tab.
All right. I saw the story in the newspaper. I didn't know what I was going to come into when I got here, because I'm kind of just getting started with this citizen public awareness thing. Mm-hmm. And one of the things it led me to was this interactive map where I saw lots of little red squiggly lines, right, and kept zooming in and zooming in and zooming in, and the lines got a little bit more defined. There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on, and we have 2 really good interactive maps on our website. One is the one that you came across, and it shows the potential projects for the next round of our State Transportation Improvement Plan, but we've also got an interactive map that shows the current projects that are funded in our State Transportation Improvement Plan. And it's, in the last few years with technology, it's really easy to find information. If you're looking to buy a house or change your place of work or business, you can really see what's coming up from a road network and transportation capital improvement plan.
There are a lot of projects. What percentage of them might actually ever get done in this next 10 years or next 50 years?
Well, our funded plan is a 10-year plan. So we better be well into the 90% of delivery, if not higher.
So the funded side, that's being built now.
That's right, yeah. And we in our 10-year plan, we break it into a deliverable portion and a developmental portion, and that's 5-year increments. The deliverable portion, we better see close to 100% delivery rate on those. Those projects are far enough along and they're moving forward. The developmental portion, those projects may have to be rescored in our next 2-year update because of where they fall in the schedule. They have to compete with the new projects that come online. And so they may fall out from a scoring standpoint. From a revenue forecast standpoint, we're making assumptions that may or may not happen. And so if the funding is different than what we expect, projects could fall out, or we could add projects if the funding is higher than we expect.
Okay, so in this 10-year project that we're talking about here, some things are funded and are in progress, and some things are still proposal?
In our current 10-year plan, it's the 2018 to 2027 STIP, State Transportation Improvement Plan. Everything is funded, is programmed. And so we're working on most everything in that 10-year plan. But the projects on the tail end of that plan still have to compete against the new projects. And so some of them will compete well and score well, and others will fall by the wayside, at least in this cycle. They may come up next time.
Okay, I hope I'm not taxing your patience too much because I'm still learning here. When do you start looking at things that haven't been planned yet at all? Is there like a 10-year plan beyond that?
We actually have a 30-year plan. It's a Metropolitan Transportation Plan, and right now we're in the 2045 timeframe. And those are not, everything's not funded, but the first 10 years is, because those are projects that are in our capital plan. So the balance of those years are not funded, but they are what we can expect to be funded using reasonable assumptions based on revenue forecast.
So when I go looking at one of those red squiggly lines in my neighborhood, how can and I can tell there's nothing being worked on right now in that area. How can I tell what its status is?
Well, if you go on that website, and if you're looking on the 2020 developmental portion, then there's a good chance that something on there, nothing started yet. But if you look at the 2018, our current plan, you can find the basic information. If you don't find what you need, there's a contact us section on the website. You can just send us a quick email and someone will respond back and give you an update on the status of that project.
Okay. And these projects are weighed against each other. I think you were talking about scoring.
Yes,
what's the process for deciding what's going to get done first? What's going to get done at all? What factors weigh into that?
So in 2013, the transportation funding law in North Carolina changed. And so now we use a data-driven process, and our funds are set into three separate categories. The first category is a statewide tier, and as an example, that's interstates. And so all the interstate type projects or freeway type projects compete against each other projects across the whole state, and that's 40% of our capital budget. Those projects are strictly data-driven only. So what the score is, what it is. So a project on I-40 in Wake County competes against a project on I-77, down in Charlotte, or I-85 in Greensboro. So we compete against each other, and the chips fall where they lie. The middle category is the regional tier, and a good way to think about that on the highway side is U.S. routes, NC routes, like NC 50, for example. And in the region, we pair divisions. In Division 5, which I'm in, we compete against regional tier projects in Division 6, and that's down in the Fayetteville area. So our funding is pooled, and there's 7 funding regions in the state, and we compete for those funds within our individual regions. The last tier is division tier, and an easy way to think about that is secondary roads, like a 1010 road in Wake County or a Fayetteville road in Durham County. Now, that's the last 30% of our capital dollars. That's divided equally by 14. So in my division, I have a fixed amount of funds that we use the prioritization process to develop the funding priorities for those. The interesting thing when the law was set up, at the statewide tier, it's 100% data-driven. So the quantitative score is just where it falls out. And then where things are scheduled depends on how long it takes to develop that project. Some projects are simpler to do, so you can get them on the ground easier. Some take a longer amount of time, depending on how big the project is, what kind of impacts it may be. So they get scheduled accordingly to that. The regional tier, the quantitative score is 70% of the total score. The remaining 30% is a qualitative score that the department and the MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations, or the RPOs work to assign those qualitative points to give those projects a little boost. And there may be things in there that either we don't have all the good data right now like we do on our interstates, or there may be other reasons it's really hard to measure, and you use that qualitative information to give it a boost for the last 30% of the score. At the division tier, half of the score is quantitative and half is qualitative. And so again, those qualitative points are shared between the department and the MPOs or RPO, depending on where the project lies.
Okay, so I'm about 80% confused. The qualitative and quantitative points, what makes up those determinations? What goes into that?
So on the quantitative side, it's strictly data. So what kind of congestion are you seeing? What kind of improvements are you doing that may relieve that congestion? What kind of safety score, safety record are you seeing? What's the crash rates? What are the critical crash rates? And you look at that objective data, and things are assigned points. And it's just strictly on the quantitative side. The qualitative side, we do look at similar things, and that helps us order the score, but then we can take that score and adjust it, because it is qualitative.
Is that where my comments that have been made on the website saying I'd like to see a new lane here or we need a road cut through, is that where that goes?
Yes, sir. So if we get a huge outcry for or against something or maybe something different, then we take that in consideration. And I'll give you an example. A few years ago, we had a request, in fact, a lot of requests to do a little cut-through road in RTP on Lewis Stevens Road, where this road would extend under 540. And because of that input we received, we were able to get that project funded. So the department and the MPO, based on those local requests and input from the local governments, in this case it was both Cary and Morrisville, then we were able to get that project funded by submitting our qualitative points and getting that project scored higher.
Where does the money come from, and how much influence does whoever is supplying the money have in deciding what gets done?
So the influence from the funding side is absolutely zero. I mean, we use the quantitative and qualitative score, and that's set out in the 2013 law. And so,
nobody's going to believe that.
Well, I can't help what they believe, but I can tell you the way it is. But in North Carolina, the funding comes from the gas tax. That's both state and federal gas tax. The funding comes from our user fees, like your driver's license cost, your license tags cost, and it comes from sales tax on new and used vehicles. And so that funding is then put into the highway fund, which that's our maintenance and operations side, or the trust fund, which is our capital side. And the trust fund is strictly driven by the quantitative and qualitative measures as outlined in that 2013 law.
Now, the state legislature, the General Assembly, is in the middle of that, doing, being a traffic cop, directing funding, aren't they? Or where do they fall in figuring out what's going to go on with transportation?
So they're the ones that wrote and passed the 2013 law. So, and that's where the influence stops.
So they get their hands off once they pass that law.
And that was the goal of the law, was to take politics out of road building.
All right, and there's trying to remember what you told me. There's the gas tax, user fees. There's federal money in there too.
Gas tax. So
that's it. That's the only federal involvement.
That's right, through the gas tax. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and does the federal government weigh in on what they want to see built?
They do, depending on whether we're using federal money. So if we're using federal money, then they have input to that. Or if we're using state money on a interstate or that affects an interchange to an interstate. So they have Federal Highway Administration gets involved and helps make sure that we're not doing anything that would degrade the interstate.
Do they do their own analysis of need and value, or do they rely on the data that you've collected?
They are partners in that and working with us. They're not doing an independent or a separate analysis. So they're involved with us when we're looking at those different things.
Okay. How far beyond automotive transportation do you guys get involved?
So that's the good thing about our plan, our capital plan. It's all the modes. So it's not just highways or automotive. It's bicycles, pedestrians, it's trains, it's aviation, airports. So all of that's included in our capital plan. Whether it's helping to fund the transit plans in the Wake and Durham County area, or the bus plans, or helping to replace buses, buy new buses for new routes, or whether we're adding greenways, improving railroads by making an intersection, a grade separation, adding a bridge at a railroad crossing, for example, or straightening out a curve, or adding a passing siding for a railroad, strengthening runways on airports, extending runways, adding hangars at some of the airports. So it's completely a transportation plan. It's not a highway plan.
Are we slowly working our way out of cars and into alternative transportation, or are we a car economy for a long time to come?
I think the way things stand now, we've got a long way to go. We went decades being auto-centric, and that's not anything we're going to be able to flip a light switch and all of a sudden get away from that. And we're doing more of that in urban areas, but even so, it's going to be a long time before we're pushed more to transit and bike and ped and other means of transportation.
As you look at the data, maybe ignoring the politics and ignoring what individual people want, as you look at the data, are we going the right direction, or are we just staying in our cars like crazy?
No, I think we're going in the right direction, and I take that by what people choose to do. Now we will certainly evolve and have to evolve, because from an auto standpoint, we can't keep building new roads. That's not the ultimate answer, and that's the good thing about our 10-year plan, is that's not all we're doing. We're doing all of that, and each of that is a piece of the puzzle. We definitely need new roads. We need wider roads, but we also need those choices too.
Do you also need more money?
Yes. Yeah. When you got a piece of pie, you can only cut it so many ways. So it's always nice if you have a bigger piece of pie.
Part of DOT go to the legislature and lobby for more money, or how do you go about trying to get more?
Our leadership does that, and looks for ways, and we've been blessed recently that we were able. The legislature passed a bond, North Carolina Build. It actually gives us some ability to bond future money and advance some projects that we wouldn't otherwise have been able to do. So that just passed this session. So that's a positive thing from a transportation funding standpoint.
Where's the DOT stand on things like driverless cars? Do you have responsibility for planning and developing for those?
Well, now our turnpike, which is part of DOT, is one of the few locations in the country that's been approved for testing for autonomous vehicles. So that's pretty good from a department standpoint. I'm not involved in that directly, but it's interesting nonetheless. And as whether it's autonomous vehicles or connected vehicles that are connected to each other or connected to our traffic systems, those things are changing the way we'll have to plan for future needs. The problem is right now it's in its infancy, and we don't know exactly how it will change it. We just know it'll change it. So we've got to stay up on the technology and stay up on some of what the other states are doing and what's happening federally along those standpoints too, to make sure that we're not behind, that we're at least even with it.
Are you working with anybody currently, any of the companies that are doing this, to take advantage of what they can do on the turnpike?
Now, again, I'm not, but the department is. Yeah, there's a lot of work going on. There's been some work done with GM. There's some other interesting things that we're doing. Some of it's on the turnpike. You may have heard that there's been some issues with some wrong-way drivers on our interstates. So we're actually running some testing program on the turnpike that's some advanced notification if somebody starts driving the wrong way. So some alerts would go to our Transportation Operations Center, and then hopefully we could get law enforcement out there sooner, and get folks redirected before there's a catastrophic incident. So there's some things like that happen. We're using technology we've installed this past year some ramp signals on 540 on the north side.
Yeah, that's one of the things I saw in the plan is ramp signals on lots more places.
Yeah, we've actually got potentially funded in this next round of our capital program on all the freeways in Wake County and parts of Durham County to do some advanced traffic management, which could be some ramp signals, maybe some differing speed limits depending on what lane you're in when the freeway starts getting capacity. how maybe the right lane starts breaking down further because of the on and off ramps, and maybe that's a different speed limit than what's on the left, provide more advanced notice when things happen and start to break down, and better to manage that and extend that better flow before things break down from a congestion standpoint.
So roads could get lots smarter, and cars could get smarter and talk to roads. Is that science fiction right now, or is it happening?
No, it's happening now, and that's part of what our project will do. I mean, some cars now have the ability to talk to each other, and it'll be decades more than likely before all of them can. But if 20% of them can, that's potentially a 20% or better improvement, because you've got that much better flow, and you don't have that stop and start. If the vehicle can see what's happening, half a mile ahead, and make a gradual adjustment rather than an abrupt adjustment, or it can base its speed on when that traffic signal is going to change. That's just the abilities or the things we can do with that are almost endless.
And I was going to ask about traffic signals. Do you guys get down to the traffic signal level at municipal interchanges, or is that somebody else's responsibility?
Well, it's a combination of both. In North Carolina, we're like only a handful of states in the country that maintain local streets. So in North Carolina, there's no county streets, unlike most of the rest of the nation. There are local streets, municipal streets, but most of the signals at the major roads in the cities, we own, we maintain. In the larger cities, we do have side agreements with them where they maintain it with their forces, and we help reimburse them for their cost. So we work like Raleigh and Durham and Cary, we do that. Morrisville, we're maintaining the signals that aren't tied to Cary's system. But just for an example.
Can traffic signals get lots smarter?
They can, and we continually look for ways to improve them. And in the bigger cities, we already have computerized signal systems where they work together. It's still frustrating to people when they may go 2 or 3 signal lights and then catch that red and think they should continue to get a green. But in a lot of our roads are so much over capacity, they're working as good as they can with the computerized signal system, with the technology we have in place. But we're always looking for ways to improve that and install additional either closed loop systems on traffic signals, which they would to better connect and coordinate the systems, or to upgrade the existing systems we have.
Are most traffic signals just kind of dumb, operating on time cycles, or are you getting lots more that have some intelligence to them?
Most signals we have are actuated, fully actuated now. It's not like in the old day when it was all on a time-based pattern or plan. Most of them now are fully actuated. They have time patterns built into them. So if you come up on the side street, it may not turn green right away because there's a time built into it to allow more green time for the main movement. But it knows you're there, and then it'll call your movement up, to earliest ability it can, and it's pretty smart. But a lot of them, especially in our suburban and rural areas, are not connected to others because they're so far apart. So they're working independently. But in the urban areas, most of the signals are connected to each other, and they're working together to provide the best plan for the system. Maybe not for your one movement, but for the system as a whole.
And how do I get it so all traffic signals are green just for me?
That's a $1 million question, right? We all want that one traffic signal at our driveway and where we work, and we want it to be green for us and red for everybody else.
Yeah, that would be good. Does the traffic signal have any idea what's going on the through traffic up and down the road? Are they smart enough to tell? I know they're looking at the turn lanes. There's sensors in the pavement that let them know when someone's waiting to make a turn. Do they look down the road and see if anybody's coming?
There are sensors in most of our traffic signals that tell you when somebody's approaching. So for an example, if you're on the main road approaching a signal and somebody pulls up on a side street, that most signals know that, hey, you're within a close enough distance. I'm not going to turn yellow and red until you pass. And so, yeah.
Those are sensors embedded in the pavement, or do you have like radars or lidars up on the pole looking down the road?
We have both, but most of it's embedded in the pavement, and that's where we have the most consistency from is the embedded sensors, the loops.
I I'm not sure what department it is, but somebody just gave the go-ahead for finishing the 540 loop around the south side. Is that totally finishing it to make a 360 loop?
So we've just got the environmental document approved for complete 540, and that document covers from Holly Springs Bypass all the way over to Nightdale Bypass, which is I-87. And we have funded in the current capital plan all of the sections to complete it. But the last section from I-40 over to the Nightdale Bypass, that's scheduled in a way it has to be reprioritized. So if you go in there and look on the map now, it's one of the projects shown as a priority or potential priority for this next cycle of our capital plan. The other section from 40 all the way back to the Holly Springs Bypass, that's early enough in our current schedule, it does not have to be reprioritized. And we're letting those or building those as 3 separate projects. The first one is we're opening bids in November of this year. That's our plan. And that'll go from 401 near Wake Tech all the way to 40. And the other 2 sections, we're opening bids in February and April of next year. And all of that will be planned to open as one project. We won't open a piece of that. We'll open it from Holly Springs all the way to I-40.
The folks on the south side of the area, south side of Raleigh in the Beltline, have to pay tolls. Folks on the north side don't. South side folks say that's not fair.
Yeah.
You agree?
I don't disagree, but the reality is, DOT working with our partners in the MPO, which are led by the local governments, made a decision years ago that they wanted to get 540 on an improved schedule. And the decision was made for us to be able to do that, it had to be tolled to offset that cost.
Will it have to always be tolled, or will it ever get paid off?
No, under the law, once the bonds are paid off, the tolls come off.
Any idea how long that is?
I don't know off the top of my head.
All right. Did you have to take any dwarf wedge mussels home and plant them in the backyard? I
did not, and I will not. Yeah.
But that was the impediment, or was that just the headlines in the newspaper?
Certainly, that's one of them. There's a few endangered and threatened species along that corridor that had to be looked at and accommodated or mitigated from the impact of 540. And so that was a big one.
And it seemed to take forever to get those decisions made.
Actually, once we were back on track, it went pretty fast, especially for the size project it is.
If there was a critic sitting on the other side of the table from me, and they wish that I would be more of a critic, they would say, why are we putting in so much money on finishing this loop, and why aren't we putting more of it into mass transportation? Well,
part of the question is how our funding is set up. We can't take this loop money and put it on a bus. That bus is not eligible for that funding because it's not set up in that statewide category. The other part of it is going back to the local plans. We are tasked, DOT and the Turnpike, with implementing what's in the local plan. And 540 is in that local plan that started years and years ago. And it's in this project, one of many, continues to be a priority for the local governments.
So if somebody wants to shift the priorities, they don't lobby the DOT, they lobby their local government?
Well, they can lobby DOT, but we're going to push them back to the local government to where a lot of this starts at.
And lobbying DOT is coming to a meeting like this or filling something out on the website?
That's correct. Yeah, we have, whether it's an individual project meeting where you may be lobbying for us to shift the road over so it doesn't impact you, or to add this sidewalk or this crosswalk or, bike lanes. You can do that on a project level. But at this level, what we're talking about is actually letting us know what your priorities are or aren't for the overall plan. And that could be for, we like this project, but we want you to do this with it versus what you're showing here.
All right. Is there anything you wished I'd asked you so far that I haven't?
No, not that I know.
Anything you wish I hadn't asked you?
No.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I told Cindy about his comment, Joey. Oh, by the way, thank you, Joey Hopkins. I told Cindy about his comment that that 2013 law where the legislature provides the funding and then doesn't get in the middle of what's going to get done. And Cindy goes, pfft. She didn't have any particular reason to be skeptical about it, just your general political cynicism. So yeah, I did say 80% confused, which is, probably about right. Let's see. I want to see if I could see that map where he was talking about I-40. But I don't know if I can, let's see. Yeah, there's the map. I'm just kind of curious what it looks like. If you look at the data. So I'm looking at the map and showing that, oh no, it's not I-40 that we want to see. It is 540. So we're, this is not great radio, and it's not even good television. Okay, so yeah, 540 is way down there. New route, future 540. Says what it is. Interesting that he was calling it the Turnpike. He may be like from the Northeast. Well, in a Southern accent. I don't know. We don't call it Turnpike. I don't call it Turnpike. Nobody else that I've ever heard of does. It's a tollway. Officially here on the map, the Triangle Expressway. Doesn't call it the Turnpike. And it says it's in the planning and design process. Some numbers I don't understand. And $168 million for construction. Oh, payback in, well, this is a long way, 2019 to 2033. So that's I don't understand that. That's too long a period, but maybe we're talking about having it paid off by 2033 and then no more tolls. I don't know. So again, I'll put the links to find those things on the Triangle Talk Show website for episode 14. If you like maps and you like digging into details and seeing what's being done and what might be done in your neighborhood or your commute to work, it could be fun to go look at that. So I was kind of hoping to have a transportation expert. I know a podcaster that does a show on transit, but I haven't had a response to my request, and I wanted to get this out just in case you wanted to comment to the DOT. We'll flood them with another comment or two. And get your opinion in there. And if I can work out the deal with a podcaster who does a transit show, then we'll come back and talk about this and explain it. Look for an episode that is called DOT for Dummies. Watch for that sometime on a Triangle Talk Show near you. That'll be it for this episode. Let's see. Who am I? There I am. I'm Gary Pierce. And we are done with this show. Thanks for listening and or watching. Over and out.